If you Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rogers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rogers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live, the final episode before we are officially in the Summer of Shane, which gets underway on Friday. Today is May the 29th, the year of our Lord 2024. I am Keith Alsep, and this is episode number 1493. Next week, we'll go over 1,500 episodes. Can't wait for that. But let's jump right in as we've got a great show lined up for you today. In just a few minutes, my good friend John Whittle, the Dean of Gamecock Baseball coverage, will join us, and we will get all the latest takes from the SEC tournament, the injury to Gavin Cassis, the Raleigh Regional, fixing the defense, the bats, which were on fire, and what a performance from Funky Cole Messina, who set the record for RBIs in an SEC tournament. Gamecocks, unfortunately, also set the record for errors in an SEC tournament, and we'll get Whittle's take on how many errors were not charged that should have been, but the errors were plentiful. All right, let's jump right into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company, Nana's Porch, servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. Whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with a whole hog barbecue and plenty of ice cold beer, Nana's Porch is your go-to for all your catering needs. If you have an event that requires a food trailer, Nana's Porch, voted among the top 3 food trailers in Charlotte by the local newspaper poll, and as we all know, the award-winning pimento cheese voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. You don't have to just be in Charlotte. You can be anywhere in that area. You can be in Rock Hill, Fort Mill, Lancaster, okay, probably even Indian Land, Great Falls, and Louisville. They've got you covered. Go to nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him I sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. And I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. All right, Dawn Staley has struck earlier today. The birdie in the nest tweet went out, and it was for a big-time player we'll talk about it later in the show. And tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily, my special guest will be Peyton Titus from Go Gamecocks in the state. We kind of teamed up on confirming that Dada was in Columbia. And then the tweet went out, Dada going official on Twitter and Instagram earlier today. Arguably one of the top 3 players in the transfer portal. And quite frankly, I think South Carolina was only interested in bringing in one of 2 players from the transfer portal. Kiki Iriafen, who chose to stay close to home. She's a native of Los Angeles and transferred from Stanford to Southern Cal. And I think Miriam Dada, a 6'4", former McDonald's All-American, Jordan Brand participant as well, a Naismith National High School semifinalist of the year. She is from the same class as Raven Johnson, Sanaya Fagan, and Breezy Hall. That now gives South Carolina the number 2, the number 4, the number 13, and the number 14 player, as Dada was ranked number 13 in the country. Of course, the Gamecocks did have the number 3 player in Sanaya Rivers. She transferred to NC State. Dada, just like Raven Johnson, missed her freshman year due to injury. She has 2 years of eligibility remaining. And all she did this past season was lead the team in field goal percentage, lead the team in blocks and offensive rebounds, and she broke a 37-year school record for blocks in a single game with 10 at Alabama, which is the second most by a player in NCAA this past season. Dada was basically a square peg in a round hole. Mike Neighbors loves to shoot the 3. It's very guard heavy. They jack them up. Her skill set was never really fully utilized. We're talking about a player that had some big time games and scored 22 points on 9 of 16 from the floor with 9 rebounds in her final game of the season against Tulsa. She had 19 points against South Carolina. She had 16 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 blocks at LSU. She had 18 points against Missouri and had a double-double with 12 points and 11 rebounds versus Auburn. And she also had a really great game against UCLA early in the season. So South Carolina adds another impact big to kind of replace some of the production of Camila Cardoso. We'll have more on that later. But the Bentonville, Arkansas native was pursued by UConn, LSU, Tennessee, Baylor, you name it. They wanted her. Dawn Staley gets another McDonald's All-American to add to the roster. All right. South Carolina's also added another national championship coach to the athletic department, adding SMU equestrian head coach Carol Gwynn. Gwynn was an assistant at South Carolina to Boo Major from 2010 to 2014, helped the Gamecocks to back-to-back SEC championships in 2013 and 2014. And that 2014 team also was national runner-up. Gwynn left after the 2014 season. She spent the past 10 years as the head coach at SMU and has won back-to-back national championships. So Ray Tanner, a lot of people criticizing him about some hires. Can't criticize him for bringing in a 2-time national championship coach in Carol Gwynn, who has Gamecock roots. Lamont Paris still has one scholarship available. We'll ask John Whittle about that, but now he also has an empty seat on the bench next to him as assistant coach Tim Buckley is leaving to join Wes Miller's staff at Cincinnati. Buckley, prior to joining the Gamecocks, had spent a decade working for Tom Crean at Marquette in Indiana. Also spent time at Wisconsin and Iowa and was a head coach at Ball State for 6 years. This gives the quarter zip an opportunity to go out and make a big-time hire. And men's basketball is also announced today will travel to Indiana to take on the Hoosiers as part of their non-conference slate. That will be on November 16th. All right, let's bring in the man of the hour and the dean of Gamecock baseball coverage, and along with Hale McGranahan, the hardest working man on the Gamecock beat, and that is John Whittle. John, welcome in. How are you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Doing wonderful. Happy to be here.
All right, so I got to ask because normally, so my best friend, Chris Lee, we've been best friends since college. He's been to every SEC venue in baseball, every away venue, every road venue, except Hoover, because he says generally you're only staying for 1 or 2 days. I know if I go on a road trip, I'm getting 3 games. And so did you pack enough underwear, or did you have to go like my college roommate, Patrick Eccles Campbell, and turn them inside out, or did you just go to Walmart and buy some extra? Well, I mean, it was a long, extended stay in Hoover.
Yeah, I always overpack. And if South Carolina had won on Saturday, I would have had to hit the laundromat, that afternoon in preparation for Sunday. But I was okay by the skin of my teeth.
Well, it was certainly an unexpected run, but a great run. And quite frankly, just your thoughts on the team's performance at Hoover and getting 3 wins and making the semifinals, I think definitely aided the Gamecocks in getting a very favorable placement in the NCAA Regionals.
Yeah, Keith, I'll be honest. It doesn't make any sense what South Carolina was able to do down there. I was on JC's show last week before the tournament talking in Jamie Bradford and Phil Molinax, that crew. Don't want to give it all the praise to JC. Jamie Bradford and Phil do a great job too. But they asked me, how I thought it South Carolina fit down there, like how this team would do, how they would fare. I said, this is a terrible team to expect to make a deep run in Hoover. I said, the athleticism's down. They don't field the ball real well. It's a huge field. They don't cover a lot of ground in the outfield with the guys they have out there right now. They haven't fielded the ball real well in general. Ball doesn't typically fly out in Hoover, and that's where a lot of their run scoring comes from. The pitching staff just wasn't set up quite right and hadn't been performing all that great. I said, this is terrible for South Carolina this week. And lo and behold, they have one of their best showings out in Hoover. So what the heck do I know? But yeah, I mean, they performed really well in a lot of phases. They were obviously pretty terrible in some ways as well. If a couple of guys field a ground ball, South Carolina's playing on Sunday. and they have Friday off too. Like they wouldn't have had to play on Friday. So, it was, I think it was a very beneficial week for South Carolina because they got to feel what it felt like to win again and beat some good teams in doing it. They got a couple of guys going in the right direction from an offensive standpoint. They got a couple of pitchers going in the right direction from a staff standpoint. I thought that overall it was a really good week for the Gamecocks down there, and certainly helped them. In terms of NCAA tournament standing, I have no way to prove it, and nobody else has a way to prove me wrong either. But I still say that South Carolina would have been on the bubble in one of those last few teams getting into the tournament should they have lost to Alabama in that first game. The RPI would have dropped probably low 20s. It would have been a 7-game losing streak, and I know that Florida wasn't one of the last 4 in, but their metrics were different than South Carolina's. So I think it certainly had a very positive effect from a lot of different standpoints, including NCAA tournament, and the fact that they were able to win 3 games down there. I think certainly put them in a position to get a favorable draw. And they certainly did.
Well, no doubt about it. So I think any discussion has to begin with just what Cole Messina was able to do over the course of that tournament. I mean, I know at one point he was 8 for 12, and I think 4 home runs, a double. He wound up with 16 RBIs. Is that right?
I think that's what it was. I think that's
14
what it was.
Going into the last LSU game. I'm pretty sure he had 2 RBIs in that game. I mean, how much does that help his stock for potentially the major league draft and for the award season for All-American and everything else? I mean, he just put on a display unlike any other we've seen from a Gamecock player in years. So here it is. 9 for 16, 9 runs scored, a double, 4 home runs, 8 walks, and 16 RBIs.
And stole 3 bases. I got the numbers filled up now.
Stole 3 bases. That's right. So, one they call catcher indifference, but he was there.
He had a phenomenal week, obviously, and he's put together several good weeks here at the end of the season. And he, from a draft standpoint, he couldn't have picked a better time to have a great week. That SEC tournament, there's a lot of power players that go and watch those games because they know that they get to see the best players in the best conference against the best competition, all back to back to back to back. And, I am certain that Cole helped himself make more money here this past week, and good for him. And good for him. Like he's picked a great time to shine, not only for himself, but for his team, because there's no better chance to be playing great baseball than, or no better time to be playing good baseball than, tournament time. So with NCAA tournament coming up here in a couple of days, I guess we're about 48, 49 hours from first pitch right now of Carolina's first game. He's in a really good spot.
I mean, no doubt about it. So, I mean, we have to talk about the 12 errors. Certainly, I think there were more than 12 errors, which I'm pretty sure is an SEC tournament record that tied it for 12. But, John, how many errors that should have been charged were not charged? Because it certainly was not the lack of hitting and even the pitching. I mean, even on Saturday, the floodgates opened. You make that routine play at third, Talmadge LeCroy, it's still 8-0. and you're in the dugout, and instead they wind up putting a 6 spot up. I mean, certainly we could go back to the previous LSU game. Late in that game, you get a Talmadge LeCroy throwing error, and then you bring in Eli Jones to induce a ground ball. And what does he do? He induces a ground ball, and it goes right between Gavin Cass's legs, under his glove, and 2-run score. And South Carolina just let runs slip away. I mean, not to mention putting in Eli Ellis, who I don't even know if he's even played third base this year. He made some costly plays in that LSU game on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you hit them. You hit the big ones, and those are obvious plays that that should have been made, and there were a bunch of plays that weren't errors that just were not clean defensively, and Ethan Petrie is still new at first base, and he came in on a chopper that got over his head that ended up going for a double. And, if he would have just taken a step back, he makes a play really easily. There was one time when he was holding a runner on where, he kind of dropped step in the wrong direction, and half of his body was in foul territory on a ground ball that, was about 5 feet inside the bag that, he probably could have made a play on if he had come off the bag in the right direction. There was a pop fly that landed in between the left fielder, center fielder, and shortstop. I mean, there were a lot of plays that just weren't made, that don't really show up in the stat sheet, or just don't or just aren't noticed, in a particular moment. So, I said before this season started that South Carolina is going to not be all that great defensively. They haven't been. They actually fielded at a higher percentage at least in league play, than I thought they would. I thought they did a pretty good job of making plays that they could make, but there certainly a lot of times where there were plays to be made that aren't errors, that were not made. So when you have a team that's not that great defensively, there are going to be time. There are always going to be times for any team, whether they're good or bad defensively, when they have a bad stretch. But when you're not very good defensively and you have a bad stretch, it really hurts you. So they're going to have to regroup a little bit. And, I think Talmadge can regroup. I mean, if we think back to last year, I think he had either 5 or 6 errors at Vandy one weekend. And, he wasn't I don't know what the problem was. Some people were blaming the turf. I think it was just more mental than anything else. But other than that, he had a fairly solid year at third base defensively, but he had a really rough weekend. The next weekend, he kind of reset and was able to go. So, I think he'll be back at third base this weekend for the regional, and he needs to be able to do this year what he did last year, and just kind of reset and forget about, that particular weekend, and forget about the SEC tournament like you forgot about Vandy last year.
No doubt. So, I mean, it is what it is. Certainly getting 3 wins, making the semis. I mean, the projections, John, you saw them. It was either at North Carolina, which is a top 4 national seed, or at Clemson, which really could have been disastrous.
Or incredible.
Or incredible. I was getting ready to say that. Particularly with the amount of shit that Eric Bakich has been talking about 2010, when I still remember the shot of the Clemson player sitting on the dugout steps eating the last of the ice cream that was in the cooler, even though they were getting their ass kicked. I'm pretty sure that was Kyle Parker ended his football career with a sack by Cliff Matthews in that game. And then in the College World Series, he made the last out of his career against the Gamecocks in a blowout loss. But I think South Carolina got a really favorable draw going to the Raleigh Regional number 10 seed. And if you look at NC State, if you look at the metrics, they're just not very good at anything, but somehow they still win games. And even you look at James Madison, I mean, in a lot of other regionals, they probably should have been a 4 seed. What's your thoughts on the Raleigh Regional and South Carolina's placement, albeit you would be paired against Georgia if you win? And as we all know, they were putting up football scores the last time South Carolina played the Dogs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're South Carolina, you couldn't have asked for a better draw. I mean, JMU was one of the last couple of teams in, and those last couple of teams in are always 3 seeds. You know, the 4 seeds are usually reserved for the automatic qualifiers from the small conferences that win their conference tournaments, and some of those dribble into the 3 seeds, and you know, those are usually given to the top seeded teams. But you know, South Carolina got one of the last teams in, and that's favorable. is a 2 seed playing a 3, because there's some really good 3 seeds out there. Not that JMU's bad, and I want to be sure to say, like, I think South Carolina got a really favorable draw in their regional. That does not mean that it's going to be easy to come out of there. You look at what NC State has done this year, and they've played some really good teams and beaten them. They have series wins over Duke, who could have been a host. Probably may have gotten gypped out of a host site, but they were right there in that 16, 17, 18 range. They have a series win over Clemson. They have a series win over North Carolina, which are both national seeds. They have a series win over Virginia, which is a host site. They have a series win over Wake Forest, which is one of the top 2 seeds in the tournament. They had a game rained out against Florida State down in Tallahassee, but they split that series 1-1. So, NC State may not have the best pitching numbers. They've got really good offensive numbers. They're the number 10 national seed. Like, they're a good team. But at the same time, like, if you're South Carolina, you feel really good about the draw that you got and how favorable it can be because of what we said about JMU. North Carolina State has been to out of the last 10 years, I think they've been to 9 tournaments, and they haven't made it out of the regional in 8 of those. So, you know, it's about as favorable as you can get. Doesn't mean the Gamecocks are going to come out of it, but you couldn't ask for a much better draw if you're South Carolina.
I mean, no doubt about it. So, John, what's the latest on Gavin Cassis? It appears he's got the hamate bone injury. That was really weird. It happened on a foul ball. I think Christian Walker had a similar injury. Is he out? Well, is it a situation of where, you know, pain tolerance will be an issue, possibly playing or not playing? What's the latest on Gavin Cassis?
Yeah, it's a broken hamate, and hamates break all the time, and you never hear about anybody playing through it. It's a pain tolerance thing, but it is a pain tolerance thing that people can't deal with. Like, if you look at the injury cross-eyed, it hurts. Like, it's a big deal. Christian Walker was able to somehow play some games through it and play at a pretty high level. It's pretty unheard of. And I don't know how Christian was able to do it, but by golly, he was able to do it and do it effectively. I don't think that Gavin Cassis is going to be able to pull off that feat like 99.9 other percent of humans. We'll see. It would probably be. I can't imagine us having any kind of inclination that he can go until maybe the day of. And, maybe if South Carolina can get through this week, maybe something changes next week. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't anticipate Gavin being able to play because, like I said, that injury happens, and it usually happens a lot on swings and misses. But it's just kind of a thing where that bone just kind of wears down over time and eventually just breaks. For guys who have their hand on the knob of the bat like Gavin does. So feel bad for Gavin. Wish for him that it could have lasted about 20 or so at bats longer, so he could finish out his career with the Gamecocks. But he and you feel bad for him too because he was playing so well at the end of the year.
No doubt. So I meant to ask this, just buttoning up on Hoover. Is it just me, or did it just seem like the ball was flying out of there like I've never seen it fly out of there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a SEC tournament record for home runs, and that was on Saturday, the first game on Saturday. So I don't know how many it ended up being over, how many it ended up being, and what the final totals were and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, and I think part of it was great weather all week. It was hot. The wind was blowing out literally every day I was there. I missed a couple of the late night sessions, but I was there for the first I was there for all of South Carolina's games, obviously, and for at least part of every other game except for the late nights. And the weather was perfect, but the wind was blowing out the whole time. Whether it was out the center, out the left, out the right, it was blowing, and it was usually blowing pretty good. That big old American flag out there down the left field line, that was standing up a lot. So I think both of those things were a big factor in it. But there's some good hitters in the league this year as well, which is evidenced by the ERAs in the league this year. The ERAs are a lot higher this year than usual, and maybe the pitching's not as great, and they don't have some of the frontline guys like is usually there, but there's some really good bats in this league this year.
Well, no doubt about that. So, John, going into this weekend, South Carolina's pitching staff has basically been consistently inconsistent all season long. Who are some of the guys you like the most based off what you've seen and what you've heard from the tournament going into this weekend in Raleigh?
Yeah, and I'll start off by saying I don't think that comment is unfair. But I will say that as I mentioned just a second ago, the pitching in general in the league hasn't been as good as usual, and these offenses are a lot better, I think, than usual as well. Maybe one is played up the other a little bit more, maybe not. But there was a long time where South Carolina's pitching staff was doing pretty well and pretty consistently based on what we kind of thought and projected going into the season. And then they changed some things up, and both from a structure standpoint of the pitching staff and also from a structure standpoint of the defense. And the ERA jumped about 1.5. So those changes didn't work. I think now, and I understand why some of those changes were made too, in terms of taking Eli off of Friday and putting him into the game 2 role. There have been times where South Carolina's had to play on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So, you're bumping guys up a day. Some guys have been a little bit tired. Some guys have been a little bit ineffective. There's been some reasons to try some different things like what they've done in terms of letting guys go one time through the lineup and then changing them out for another guy. So most of the things they've done have made sense. All of that being said, you haven't played since last Saturday. You start on Friday. You were able to manage those last couple of days out in Hoover to where you didn't really extend too many guys too much. You didn't tax too many guys too much. your guys, your pitching staff, pretty much all of your guys should feel relatively fresh and relatively good going into the weekend in NC State. So I think you need to go back to what was working. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think you're going to see Eli Jones on Friday. That is what I would do. I would give him the ball and say, you're our leader. You're our guy. You've been our dude for all year long. You need to continue to be our dude. Go out there and get us 6 innings and get us to Saturday. And, I think that's probably what's going to happen. Now, Garrett Gainey's pitched well in a starting role here late in the season, and I think that there's a chance that you'll see him as a Saturday starter against NC State. I think that makes sense from a matchup standpoint. NC State's best hitters or most of them are left-handed. So I think that's probably what you'll see. I don't know, but I feel like that's the move to make is just go ahead and announce those 2 guys, and everybody else, tell them to be ready, and then you figure it out after those 2 games. But, I don't think that the right move this weekend will be to do what they've been doing for the last month. I think you need to play some defense out there behind these guys and trust that the guys you give the ball to in a starting role, give them the ball and let them try to go.
All right, good stuff. All right, so moving back because of the Cassis injury, do you think does Cole Messina have to catch every game? I mean, if something happens and you get in the loser's bracket, if you have to play 2 games in a day, I thought Dalton Reeves looked the best he had looked all season long in Hoover. He even hosed a guy at second base, which was kind of surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dalton looked fine. And that's good. Like if something happens and you need him back there, or if the situation presents itself, then yeah, I mean, I think that's a good thing. But Cole is, one of the best defensive players at any position in the country, and that's at the catcher position. And not only is he back there to catch a baseball and to occasionally throw a guy out, like he's the leader of the team and he's the quarterback. He handles the pitching staff, and Dalton does fine. I'm not trying to take anything away from Dalton, but Cole is an A+ dude back there behind the plate, and you need your best guys in their best spots at this point in time. And, if South Carolina is in a situation where they've got to play 2 games in a day, or if they've played, if it gets too much, then that's a nice little security blanket to have. But there's no sense in taking him out from behind the plate. He's too good unless something happens to where it's too much. So, I don't mess with it. I certainly am not putting him at third base. If he needs to go over to first base and play a little bit, I think he would be fine over there. But there's no situation where I'm putting him over at third base, unless they're in the 17th inning and you're physically out of all other players.
All right, good stuff. So while I got you, I'd like to just ask 2 or 3 basketball questions if you have the time, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. No, if one of those questions is who South Carolina going to hire to replace Tim Buckley, I can go ahead and tell you I don't have a clue. I don't have any names on that one right now. But yeah, we can talk a little hoops as well. We can talk a little ponies if you want to talk some ponies. We can talk some golf if you want to talk some golf. We can talk. We'll talk whatever you want. Fire away.
Man, you are awesome. So I do want to touch on Tim Buckley leaving South Carolina to go to Cincinnati to join Wes Miller's staff. And I want your thoughts on this. I think Lamont Paris is in a lot better position right now to go out and grab a guy, not from UT Chattanooga. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because those guys he brought have certainly done an excellent job. But I think we all hoped last time Paris would be able to go out and get a guy that was familiar with the SEC, that had a track record of recruiting in the SEC footprint, somebody that would be connected to the AAU programs and the right shoe companies. What are your thoughts on what Lamont Paris will be looking for as he looks to replace Tim Buckley?
Yeah, I think the door is wide open for him to do kind of whatever he wants to do. I feel like there were some folks who are not named Lamont Paris who were putting a little bit of pressure on Lamont Paris when he brought in his staff to go hire a veteran, go hire somebody who's been in the league or in high-level basketball, who's maybe been a head coach, who Lamont could kind of lean on a little bit to provide some experience and some guidance and be a little bit of a Pete Limbo type, so to speak, for Shane Beamer, what Limbo was for Shane Beamer. Shane was obviously never a head coach. Lamont Paris was a head coach at UT Chattanooga, but to help him kind of navigate some of the things that, Lamont would have at South Carolina, but maybe not so much at Chattanooga. So, Lamont's been through it now for a couple of years, and, he doesn't necessarily need that kind of guy anymore. He can go out and hire a veteran if he wants to. He can go out and get somebody who's been in the college game for 40 years, like Tim Buckley was, but he doesn't have to. He should have a door. He should have a grasp of what he has to do here to be successful, to where he doesn't need an older guy. Now, this isn't the prime time to be hiring basketball coaches. Most of the positions have been filled, and, that's both good and bad, right? Like, he's not going to be out there competing for guys on the open market. Like, if he finds a guy that he wants, that guy may be wanted by 2 or 3 other programs, and then you're in a bidding war, and then you have to navigate all of that stuff. He might be able to have some folks reach out to him and say, "Hey, yo, I'm interested in this job," and because they're not completely happy with where they are right now. And, so I think that I think that there's going to be some opportunity for Lamont to hire a really good coach. And coming off of a year like they had, Lamont getting some of the favorable press that he's gotten, the fact that he's SEC Coach of the Year, like all of those things, I think are certainly going to be really beneficial in helping him be able to make a really good hire.
So, 2 names that I like. One, Steve Smith, who was at Clemson, now at Florida State. And then my guy, C.Y. Charlton Young, who is at Missouri, who is a voracious recruiter. What are your thoughts on those 2 guys?
Well, we need to throw Dave Dickerson in there too, because every time South Carolina has an opening as an assistant coach, his name always pops up. So we're going to throw those 2 guys out there.
The obligatory Dave Dickerson
as well. But those 3 guys all typically seem to pop up a little bit. And, I don't know. Like I said earlier, I don't have any real insight just yet as to who Lamont's going to target. I was told that by somebody, they thought that Lamont would go with somebody who he's got a good relationship with already. I don't know what kind of relationship he has with those guys, and who knows, maybe he goes with somebody who he doesn't know at all. I just don't have any real insight right now as to who might be on that list.
How about Bo Ryan? That'd be the perfect guy. He's got a great relationship with him.
Yeah, well, I probably don't think that one's going to happen, but maybe somebody from the Bo Ryan tree.
Certainly could be. All right, so South Carolina still has one scholarship remaining. They did add point guard Jamari Thomas after it looked like they were going to get Jameer Brickus, and then that kind of went off the rails, I guess. So it looks like Jamie Vinson is a guy they really zeroed in on. He's from here in Austin, Texas. Spent his senior year at Oak Hill. He's also visited Kentucky, Rice, and Rutgers. It appeared he was going to make an announcement over the weekend. What's the latest with Jamie Vinson?
Yeah, I mean, I was told that he was going to come to a decision at some point over the Memorial Day weekend, and I wasn't told really a time frame on an announcement. But I will say that at least the folks around South Carolina and the people in his recruitment thought that a decision would have been made by this point. I don't have a reason as to what's taking so long just yet. I don't know of any other visits he's trying to take. I know there were a couple of schools that were trying to get him to take visits this week. I don't know if those are going to end up happening or not, or if he's just going to make a decision at some point and call it a day. I don't think Kentucky is really in it. Rice, he visited Rice before South Carolina. He visited Rutgers after South Carolina. South Carolina's felt pretty good about him and haven't really made plans to target anybody else, if something goes wrong in this recruitment. So we'll see what happens if Vincent picks somewhere else. But, he's the guy they're focused on, and they felt good about him. So we'll see what happens. I'm a little bit surprised that we don't know of where he's going just yet, but I would imagine it's got to be sooner rather than later. Or if it's not sooner rather than later, I think we've got to have figured out why it's not sooner rather than later. Whether he's going to take a couple more visits before making a decision, like something's going to have to come out here on his recruitment here pretty soon, I would think.
No doubt. So then on Friday evening, the Gamecocks get the good word from 6'8", 220-pound four-star forward E.J. Walker. I mean, this is a big-time get, in my opinion, when you look at the fact that, Purdue and Matt Painter wanted this guy, Ohio State wanted this guy with their new coaching staff, and Wisconsin wanted this guy. And usually it's 3 Big Ten schools and 1 SEC school. It kind of goes the other way, but South Carolina got the last official visit. He's coached by his dad. He's got a great skill set. He can step out and shoot the three. Not a crazy, ridiculous athlete, but athletic enough. What are your thoughts on E.J. Walker and what his commitment means for the program?
Yeah, and you're right in everything that you said. I do think that he wants to show that he's a better athlete than people perceive him to be, which is part of the reason. I mean, he told me as much. It's part of the reason why he wanted to come play SEC basketball, to show that he's a better athlete maybe than he's been given credit for. But I think it came down to a couple of things. I think he fits. I think he believes he fits really well with Lamont Paris and what he wants to do, from as far as being a guy who probably plays the 4 and can get out there and shoot it a little bit, and he's a really good passer. Like, he's a really good, skilled offensive player, and I think he fits really well with what Lamont wants to do. But I think it was just the comfort factor with Lamont, and the fact that South Carolina, led by Lamont Paris, but also with the rest of the coaching staff, showed him that kind of love that he wanted to feel. And, they were in constant communication with him. He said every time he played a game, he would look up and Lamont Paris was right there to watch him. South Carolina staff was right there to watch him. He just felt wanted by the Gamecocks, really more than any other school. So, I think all of that kind of went together to come to this decision. And, he made it close to a week before his announcement, about 5 or 6 days before his announcement. And, I know that the family was getting a little bit of pressure to stay around there, be in Big Ten country, and EJ was, and that's not really what he wanted to do. He wanted to come down and play ball in the SEC, and South Carolina beat out some really good schools.
No doubt about it. All right, so your thoughts on, obviously, Boo Major retired. Ray Tanner goes out and gets a back-to-back national championship coach in Carol Gwynn from SMU, but somebody that spent several years as an assistant with Boo Major. I mean, I don't really think you could have made a better hire than this.
No, really couldn't. New head pony coach. It's not a HPC. It's not a head ball coach like Steve Spurrier. It's a HPC, like a head pony coach. So, I know she's really excited to be back here. And, she was part of the staff that has South Carolina's only 2 SEC championships back in 13 and 14. And they ended up winning the national championship in 2015, the year that Carol left. But, she had recruited a bunch of those players, coached a bunch of those players that were on that roster. So, South Carolina, no disrespect intended to Boo Major or the coaches after her, but, they really kind of fell off, when Carol left. So she did a phenomenal job at SMU. They didn't have a winning record for the previous 3 years before she was hired. Never had a losing record in 10 years after she was hired. From year one on, she never had a losing record. Won the conference for 4 straight seasons, and then won the national championship her last 2 years. So, she comes from SMU, not SMC. I know folks think that Ray Tanner can only hire a Spartanburg Methodist. Yeah, I think folks think Ray Tanner can only hire Spartanburg Methodist level head coach. But he got Southern Methodist SMU coach instead of SMC. So good for Ray for making a heck of a hire, and now he's got to do it with the golf coach, and we'll see if there's anything after that.
All right, so since you mentioned if there's anything after that, I guess last question as we wrap it up. You opened the door, okay? So
I did. That was my fault.
Too much law and order. So I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express a couple of weeks ago on a baseball playoff trip. So what has to happen the rest of the way for Mark Kingston to be back? I know you've used the word special, to win a bunch of games in the postseason. We're here at the regional. How much does what they did at the SEC tournament come into play with this versus the rest of the season? And I'm really don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah, and I can't set a benchmark. I can't say, I can't say, if he makes a super regional, he's definitely back, or if he doesn't get out of a regional, he's definitely fired. I don't know if there's a benchmark or what it is. I just know that, I said coming into the season that they were going to have to show some consistency and some progress coming out of last year. Like the Mark Kingston era has been up and down throughout. They went to a super regional his first year and then had one of the worst records in modern Carolina baseball history his second year. And then it was COVID. And then they kind of backed into a host of a regional, but we're fine. I mean, it was a decent year. It was fine. Then they had one of the worst in program history, then back up to a super regional. And here we are. Like, that's not what South Carolina baseball is. Like, it's supposed to be a program that consistently puts a competitive program out on the field. And, that's not what it's been in the Mark Kingston era. So I thought it was important to go out there and contend for something, contend for championships, be able to look like a competent program from start to finish. And, South Carolina was 13-17 in the SEC and number 10 out of 14 teams in the SEC. And like, that's not really good enough. So, you have to evaluate that. You got to balance that with what the postseason looks like. And, I don't think the SEC tournament really does much to enhance the resume, just like I don't think it would have done anything to hurt the resume. Like, if they would have lost that game against Alabama, like, I don't think that's a reason why Mark Kingston wouldn't come back if he's not back. Like, I don't think the SEC tournament plays much of a role in that decision one way or the other, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of, what the program looks like, because you got so many different teams playing for whatever. Like, Kentucky was playing to go home. Like, I've never seen a coach so happy than Nick Mingione in that press conference after South Carolina beat him. That man's smile was as big as I've ever seen. He said,
Dave Van Horn too. I mean, I don't think Arkansas gave two shits about being in the SEC tournament this year.
Right. And that's fine. So, like, you can't really judge, success or failure based on that tournament. So I don't think that's going to play much of a big role. But since you didn't have a particularly good regular season, like, I think you got to do a little something in the tournament, because when you start evaluating, what the program looks like and where it is, like, you got to have something to hang your hat on this year, right? So, that's kind of where I think things kind of stand, and we'll see. But I was kind of talking about softball. I wasn't even talking about baseball. Who knows what's going to happen with softball too? I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, look, so Beverly Smith has had exactly one winning record in the SEC since she was named head coach, and I think started in 2011. They've only been on the right side of the ledger one time. How does she still have a job? I mean, I know they make it to the NCAA tournament because everybody in the SEC makes the NCAA tournament. But I mean, okay, let's look at the ACC. Like, I don't think Duke started playing softball until 2018. And you look at their program and their coach, who, by the way, if you know the athletic director and there is a change, Marissa Young at Duke is definitely would be number one on my list. And look, I know Beverly Smith is one of Dawn Staley's BFFs, and Champ stays there at her house when the women's basketball's out of town or whatever. But one winning SEC record in 13 years.
Yeah, I mean, like, I thought that after finishing last in the SEC back to back in 21 and 22, like, I thought that would be enough, and it hasn't been.
4-20 that year, I think.
4-20. And with the thing with softball is that the SEC is so difficult that, I mean, you mentioned Duke and Clemson can be thrown in there. Like, they weren't really anything. Clemson wasn't even around, and then they've ascended in the ACC. You can make a big investment into softball at South Carolina, and it's going to be hard to move upward. Like, it's hard in that league. And do you really want to, and I'm asking this somewhat rhetorically. I mean, I don't have the answer and it's going to be different for everybody, but do you really want to sink a bunch of resources into the softball program to have them be 9th or 10th in the SEC instead of, 12th or 13th? Or do you want to invest those resources into football or basketball or somewhere else and maybe be a little bit more or be with a more impactful sport than softball? I think you invest in softball because I do think that the popularity of the sport is on the rise. It's one that you get to see on ESPN from time to time, SEC Network from time to time. So I think you do invest in softball and take money from somewhere to show a commitment into that program. But for some, that's not going to be the right answer. But to move upward, you're going to have to make a significant financial investment in terms of hiring the right people, funding the program the right way. It's going to take a lot more than what's currently given.
No doubt. All right. So hypothetically, if John Whittle's the athletic director and Mark Kingston is not back next year, who would be your first three?
Oh no, we're not gonna play that game. We're not gonna play that game. I'll take the last question over there from in the chat box since Craig Godwin was so nice to come in here and hang out. I don't think that I don't think we'll see Evan Stone, which I think is unfortunate. That kid's worked really hard and is tremendously passionate about this program. He can go out there and play defense. I know he hadn't been very good offensively in his career here, but he's worked really hard to get better. And, when he was out there early in the season, given a chance, he played well and did everything right that you could ask for. I wish he would get a shot, but it's just not going to happen. They need Brenling in there at the leadoff spot. Blake Jackson's playing too well. Kennedy Jones, there's just no spot for him. So, Brenling isn't hurt. He's just got a weak arm. I do think that there's probably an old injury in there somewhere that, probably just healed on its own and just probably I don't think his shoulder is right, but he's not hurt. That's just kind of what his arm is.
All right, John. So when do you leave from Raleigh? And tell us what you got coming up on the BigSpur.com.
Yeah, I'm leaving. I think they practice at 11:15 tomorrow, maybe 11:15, 11:30. So I'll have to leave earlier than I like to, get up earlier than I like to, get in the car earlier than I like to be able to get up there in time. Then I'll have to go take a nap afterwards because I'm not used to getting up before the sun does. But yeah, I'll be up there for practice tomorrow morning. It's either at 11:15 or 11:30, and we got press conferences right after that. So we'll have plenty of coverage from up in Raleigh on the Big Spur. I do think that there'll be plenty of things happening up there, and I'll be up there for that. Be monitoring some hoop stuff. I'll be monitoring the men's golf search. I'm trying to put together some nuggets right there for people who are interested on what's going on with the men's golfing search. I don't know, Keith. Everything else that's going on, we'll be on top of. I don't know what Hale's got from an official visit standpoint this weekend, but by golly, I know that him and JC and Tony and those guys are going to have the football stuff covered. I'll handle hoops and baseball and ponies and golf and whatever else. They'll take care of the football and the recruiting stuff.
The summer of Shane is ready to happen once again. It is.
I'm ready for it too. When good things, when there's good things happening in the football program, that makes everybody happy. When everybody's happy, the message board's great. When the message board is great, that makes me happy. And when I'm happy, it doesn't usually last for long, but I'll be quite content whenever the next summer of Shane happens, and hopefully that's in hours or days and not months or weeks.
That's right. Hopefully about 72 to 96 hours away. Welcome Homes will be out on X.
There we go. Let's do it. Let's land a couple of 4-star defensive tackles, since that's what most folks like to complain about. Let's get some big boys there for the defensive line.
No doubt, John. I can't thank you enough. And even though you may not stay happy long, I know everybody that's watching this and will listen to this when we put it up is happy. And I'm happy that you were able to spend as much time as you were with us today. Very gracious with your time. Thank you so much. Safe travels and hopefully a successful weekend for Gamecock baseball. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Keith. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. That is the venerable John Whittle from thebigspur.com, the dean of Gamecock baseball coverage. All right. So the Summer of Shane is coming up. Gamecocks' first day of football camp is Friday. There's one name in particular I'm watching for that, and that is Blackville Hilda athlete Jaquel Holman. I know Clint, if he's on here, and Craig. This guy's from Craig's neck of the woods now, over the I-20 corridor there. Blackville Hilda, 6'1", about 200, ran in the 10.8s and the 100 meters. That's really moving for a guy not named Nicholas Harbor that weighs over 200 pounds. He can play running back. He can play safety. South Carolina is recruiting him as an athlete. He could be a linebacker. He's 6'1", 220. He will be at Shane Beamer's first day of camp. All right, so let's pay some bills here. If you enjoy listening and watching the free show here today on YouTube and would like more of this podcast, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual VIP subscriber to Gamecock Pod Daily. You'll be able to listen to this show every single day, Monday through Friday, with special guests like John Whittle, like Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur, Mike Yuba from Gamecock Central, Jordan Kay, and Peyton Titus, who will be with us tomorrow from Go Gamecocks and the State. Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast. Brad Crawford, national college football writer for 24/7 Sports, and many, many other great guests. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to our weekly live Zoom call, which is the Garnet and Black Town Hall. We will have our final Wednesday town hall of the year tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern. Okay, that happens every single week. We'll go back to Tuesdays in June all the way through March. Then we switch to Wednesday for high school baseball season. But that's when you can join in with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends in a live interactive Zoom call. That normally lasts for an hour. After that, you can stay tuned in for our overtime segment, which is unrecorded. That's where there's a lot of scoop and real discussion. It's like going down to your favorite sports bar or pub and having a drink, eating your dinner, and talking to your favorite Gamecocks about what we all love the most, whether it's men's basketball, women's basketball, football, recruiting, baseball. Trust me, there's been a lot of angst and consternation over Mark Kingston and Gamecock baseball. Tonight, there'll be rejoicing over Miriam Dauda joining the women's basketball program. We'll talk about men's basketball. Really, anything goes, and there's always Kim Mulkey jokes as well. So in addition to the weekly Zoom call, which is the Garnet and Black Town Hall, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast that during football season. That's the morning after. That drops on Sunday before noon Eastern, where I give my thoughts on the previous week's South Carolina games, everything that happens nationally and in the SEC. And we love to make fun of Dabo when Clemson loses. So all you have to do is go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily, all lowercase, no spaces. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Gamecock Pod. That's the show. Or you can follow me at K Allsep on X. Go to the top of the homepage. You'll be able to find the link. Click on that, and if all else fails, go to the old Google machine and Google Gamecock Pod Daily. Sign up. You can get 7 days free. And if you sign up now, next week, during the first week of the month, you'll get essentially 3 months off an annual VIP subscription. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, back to the show. All right, so the Summer of Shame this weekend. There are currently, I think, 13 official visitors. And then you've got my camp guy, Jaquel Holman, which if that works out, I'm expecting him to commit on the spot. So you could get a welcome home on Friday. Okay, here's the slate of visitors currently on deck for this coming weekend. And I want to make sure nothing's changed over the last hour or so. I don't think there has. So here we go. All right, so 5-star defensive end Jared Smith, 6'6.5", 235 pounds, from Alabaster, Alabama. The Oracle, Steve Wiltfong, formerly at 24/7 Sports, now at the On3 Network. He issued basically the equivalent of a crystal ball for the Gamecocks for Smith. Smith made a spring visit to Ole Miss. They've got some momentum. But you really got to credit Shane Beamer, Sterling Lucas, Clayton White, and the South Carolina staff here. I like where the Gamecocks stand, but with an out-of-state 5-star guy, it's a tough pull, but he's in this weekend. I'd call South Carolina the co-favorites, and they could be the favorites after the visit. 4-star offensive lineman Jalen Gilchrist from Virginia Beach, Virginia, who's 6'5", about 310 pounds. He's bigger than listed on his 24/7 profile. He's a top 100 offensive lineman. South Carolina's the clear leader here. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he doesn't end it shortly after this weekend. Maybe he makes his visits. The good news is it seems like everybody that's coming in is planning on making a summer decision. All right, then you've got a guy who I think has a chance, has an opportunity to move up to even 5-star status, and that is cornerback Shamari Earl, 6'2", 180 from Chester, Virginia. He's currently the number 68 player in the country in the 24/7 Sports composite. He committed as soon as he got on campus, even before the spring game started. He's in this weekend. Okay, some big lifts this weekend. Cortez Smith, an offensive lineman from Parkview High School in Lilburn, Georgia, 6'3", 310. He's a 4-star guy. I think Georgia's going to be tough to beat, but hey, South Carolina's going to shoot their shot with him. Jadon Blair, who's a 6'4", 190-pound safety from Winston-Salem. I think Notre Dame and Penn State are the top two here. But again, Torian Gray, one of the best in the country. You going to shoot your shot. Same goes for Dontrell Glover, a 6'2", 315-pound offensive guard from Langston Hughes High School in Lilburn, right in Fairburn, Georgia. He visits this weekend. I think this is a guy South Carolina's got an excellent opportunity to really make a move with this weekend. Probably the number one player in the state of South Carolina, Malik Clark, 6'2.5", 185 pounds. He ran 10.55 at the Upper State track meet. This is probably going to be South Carolina and North Carolina, but he is visiting Georgia unofficially tomorrow, so we'll have to see how that goes. You already have one 4-star defensive tackle committed, Caleb Williams, 6'6", 260. He's going to be a guy that'll probably play at 300 pounds. He's from Chesterfield, Virginia. He visits this weekend. He committed at the spring game. A guy I'm definitely putting on commitment watch is Irmo quarterback / athlete A.J. Brand. He's 6'1.5", 204. He visits this weekend. I think South Carolina, since they don't have a quarterback, could say, hey, we will give you a chance to play quarterback, but if it doesn't work out, we really love you as a safety, a lot like DQ Smith. We'll see what happens there. I like the Gamecocks' chances. I also like the Gamecocks' chances with Isaac Souls Jr., who's a 6'2", 295-pound center from Mayo High School in Louisville, Kentucky. That's a big-time sports program. I'm pretty sure that's where Rajon Rondo and almost every other big-time athlete that comes out of Louisville, they play at Mayo High School. This is South Carolina and NC State. I think the Gamecocks can make a huge move this weekend. Okay, Jeff Overton, running back from the Alexandria, Virginia area. That's that Northeast Virginia area near Washington, D.C. Technically, he's listed at Quantico. That's where the FBI headquarters is located. He's 5'10.5", 187. He's the only running back right now that has an official visit scheduled, but I do anticipate 3-star Franklin running back Jaden Jackson, who measured 5'11.5" and weighed 215 at Texas's Junior Day. And he also ran a 4.47 laser time 40. To me, he's my personal favorite. I've got some connections to Franklin. I did their baseball playoffs. They win state championships there. He plays in a wing T offense. But he's got great DNA. His dad's 6'6", 345. His mom still holds most of the track records at Franklin. He's got a younger brother who's already 6'2" or 6'3". He's probably going to be an outside linebacker, defensive end type. I would love it for South Carolina and Marquell Blackwell to get into Texas by adding Jaden Jackson, but they also like Jaden Breaker. So we'll see what happens. Or I'm sorry, Jeff Overton. We'll see what happens there. And then the final visitor, another guy I think South Carolina's in great shape with, Jaden Breaker, a guy they made an offer to early in the spring, 6'4", 210. He can run like a deer. They like him as a linebacker. He could end up being that jack or buck guy that stands up or can come up and rush off the line, kind of a hybrid pass rusher type guy. But South Carolina really likes him as a linebacker. He's in, as well as Tayshawn Austin, who is a 6'4", 220-pound guy that South Carolina also likes as a linebacker, but he could be an edge guy as well. And then you just never know who else is going to show up for the first weekend of the Summer of Shane, but wouldn't surprise me if we got 2 or 3 welcome homes this weekend from Shane Beamer. All right, so it's a really big deal. Dawn Staley issued the tweet. I picked up kind of some smoke that Miriam Dauda, South Carolina, publicly was involved with her. Some erroneous account said that it would probably be Baylor or Tennessee for her. She only visited 2 schools. She visited Baylor, where her best friend attends. It is closer to Bentonville, Arkansas than Columbia, South Carolina. But folks, I got to say, Waco is the armpit of Texas, okay? Probably the nicest thing in Baylor is Baylor's football stadium. I mean, I'm sorry. Waco is basically like a rat-infested area. I mean, there's nothing nice. There's nothing shiny. There's nothing that everybody knows about in Baylor besides McLean Stadium, which is right off I-35. I'm not knocking the school. It's excellent, but I wouldn't send my daughter to Baylor. I can tell you that. And so South Carolina adds another 6'4", post player, a McDonald's All-American. So Craig said, Magnolia, that is a nice place, okay, but so is Health Camp, which is probably the most unhealthy place to eat in Waco. But Charlie's is really the place everybody goes in Waco. It's infamous. It's huge. It's always packed. That's my favorite spot. I mean, I just don't, as somebody that's had to drive all over Waco to doctor's offices, I mean, it is the armpit of Texas. So, but at any rate, let's talk about Miriam Dauda. This is a great fit for South Carolina. She's got SEC experience. She's had her biggest games against the best opponents on their schedule, even though she was a square peg in a round hole. She still shot almost 33% from 3, even though that's not her strength. It's in the mid-range. She can play with her back facing the basket. She's got big hands. She's got a long reach. I don't know what her wingspan is, but I'd have to imagine it's probably 6'10", 6'11", or 7 foot wingspan. She's a great shot blocker. She's very instinctual. She can switch on screens and stay in front. She's not as athletic as Ashlyn Watkins. She's got a different game. She's not the biggest or most physical presence, but she is a great shot blocker, a tremendous athlete, very skilled offensively, and a defensive stalwart. And she fits in. And so Raven Johnson is a McDonald's All-American. Tahina Paupau's a McDonald's All-American. Malaysia Fulwiley, Breezy Hall, Tessa Johnson, Sanaya Fagan, Ashlyn Watkins. Now you add Dauda. Okay, and then you add Madison McDaniel and Joyce Edwards. And quite frankly, Adele Tack would have been a McDonald's All-American, as would Chloe Kitts who's 6'3". Joyce Edwards is 6'3". Sanaya Fagan, 6'3". Ashlyn Watkins is 6'3" or 6'4". Daughter's 6'4". Adele Tack is 6'6". Okay. I don't know if Sakima Walker's coming back or not. I know, one guy that covers it for Gamecock Central did not include her in a story that was published today. Daughter is just going to make playing time even less for her, for Walker, barring an injury, and we don't know if she's coming back or not. She could, but maybe she doesn't. If she does come back, South Carolina really has 6 guards, okay? Raven Johnson, Malaysia Fulwiley, Tahina Powell, Tessa Johnson. Breezy Hall is a 6'1" swing player. Tessa Johnson can play 1, 2, or 3. Malaysia Fulwiley can play 1 or 2. Raven Johnson is a true point guard. So is Maddie McDaniel, who is the number 2 point guard in the country. She's 5'9". She is a jet. You've heard me say it many times. Had she not injured her meniscus, she would have probably been on the team 18 or 19 and under Team USA. Joyce Edwards is on that team. She's 6'3". She could play 4 or she could play 3. Okay. Miriam Daughter, South Carolina, now with Chloe Kitts, Sanaya Fagan, Ashlyn Watkins, and Miriam Daughter have 4 experienced SEC tried and true tested players that can play in the post. You add Joyce Edwards, who's the number 1 player in the country, who's 6'3", who's a positionless player. I think she could play 3 or 4. And then you got Adele Tack. Okay, and I know a lot of people don't understand this, but for the 100th time, for the people that are listening to this podcast, Adele Tack by June will most likely be 100% from her injury. Look it up. Okay, when you have a dislocated kneecap and you tear that ligament, it is an 8 to 12 week recovery. Now, for a world-class athlete, maybe that is another month. Maybe it's 16 weeks, okay? But she had her surgery in February. All right, so that's March, April, May. Okay, maybe it's so what if it's in June at some point? You're talking about an elite 6'6" player that's athletic, that's a shot blocker, that has great hands, that has a soft touch, that has a high basketball IQ, and is going to be ready to roll. By the way, she's now 1 for 1 in recruiting because she hosted Miriam Daughter and she got it done. So shout out to Adele Tack for helping Dawn Staley and staff close the deal. So South Carolina now has, if Sakima Walker comes back, they have 7 front court players, but you have 6 truly elite front court players in Kitts, Edwards, Fagan, Watkins, Daughter, and Tack. And you have 6 backcourt players in Raven Johnson, Powell, Fulwiley, Tessa Johnson, who, by the way, was the leading scorer in the national championship game, and Breezy Hall, who will be the captain of the team, and Madison McDaniel, who's an elite point guard. Dawn Staley basically picks which point guard she wants every year, and she generally gets that player. This year, it was Madison McDaniel. So South Carolina's roster is stacked. All right, let's say Walker does not come back. that gives you 12 players, and 10 of them are McDonald's All-Americans. And if Chloe Kitts would have stayed in high school, she would have been a McDonald's All-American. And had Adele Tack not had the dislocated kneecap, she would have been a McDonald's All-American. Before her injury, she was the number 9 rated player in the class of 2024. Joyce Edwards, the number 1 player. Maddie McDaniel, certainly a top 10 player by most scouting services. So you've got 3 elite freshmen coming in. Adele Tack's been on campus since January, and now you add Miriam Dauda, who, let's be honest, outside of Kiki Iriafen, who, by the way, I look back at the rankings for her class, she was like number 29 in the country out of high school. She developed into the great player that she became at Stanford. She was clearly the number 1 player in the transfer portal. Okay, South Carolina wanted her. She chose to stay on the West Coast, even though she's smart enough to graduate Stanford in 3 years. You know, how many shots is she going to get with Juju Watkins taking 30 shots a game? Okay. But Southern Cal will be formidable. I mean, they got my second favorite player in the class of 2024, Kennedy Smith, who I would rate ahead of Sarah Strong and right behind Joyce Edwards. I think those are probably the top 3 players in the class. I don't think Jelani Cambridge is. Okay, but that's just my opinion. I do like Kate Koval, who's going to Notre Dame to play for Niall Ivy. But this roster is elite at South Carolina. I mean, and there were some other transfers out there that wanted to come to South Carolina. Okay, and Dawn Staley, very careful about protecting the culture. Okay, you know, there was a young lady a few seasons ago that Dawn Staley got her sister out of high school. She had to go to junior college, never made it in. Then this young lady went to Tennessee. Dawn Staley brought her in, and it almost ruined her program. All right. She's not going to let that happen because you have a culture, you have a close-knit group, and a group of unselfish players that understand that they are stronger together and that there is power in numbers. Miriam Dauda could have gone to Baylor or Tennessee or UConn and probably been an immediate starter. She could have gone a lot of places. I don't know if she'll start or not. I'd say probably not, but she'll play a good bit. But at South Carolina, it's about stacking national championship trophies. And by adding Miriam Dauda, that gives you 12 elite players on your roster. And if Sakima Walker comes back, she's a great teammate, a great culture fit. She will improve. That gives you another 6'5" body to throw at opponents. All right, so I've only done this once before. I'll save this for last. This is kind of my Scott Van Pelt one big thing. And so the Tuesday after South Carolina won the national championship, the day after they won it on that Monday, happened to be the 50th anniversary of Henry Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's home run record. April the 8th, 1974, I still remember it. I was 10 years old. Hank Aaron was my first sports hero. I had one in every sport. For baseball, it was Henry Aaron because baseball was the first sport I was introduced to. In football, it was Joe Namath. I had the little, you could get it in a box. It was a hutch. You'd get a football. You got the Jets helmet, the jersey, and the pants. It was a Joe Namath uniform. I had it. Broadway Joe. I loved him. The Jets, and Joe Namath, that was the first football team I really ever knew. But on Monday, it was a somber day for me because one of my first basketball heroes, Kevin Joyce for the Gamecocks, was really that guy. But Bill Walton from UCLA still holds the record. He went 21 for 22 in the NCAA championship game to help UCLA win the national championship. I don't remember watching Lou Alcindor play on TV, but the four greatest big men of all times is Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Lou Alcindor, who later became known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Bill Walton. Bill Walton won 2 national championships at UCLA. He followed Lou Alcindor. He was a guy that his dad was a music teacher, and even he said was the most unathletic man he had ever seen in his life. I still remember hearing Denny Crum at a big-time AAU event in Las Vegas tell the story of how he had to trick John Wooden into going to watch Bill Walton play high school basketball. Bill Walton was riddled with injuries. Even in high school, he had knee and foot problems. And the sport that he loved the most ended up being so cruel to him, it's unbelievable. So one day after practice, Denny Crum tells John Wooden, coach, we got a booster event. And so they drive up to this high school gym, and they walk in, and there's a high school game going on, and Wooden wants to know what's going on. And he said, Coach, just stay. Let's go. I want you to see this guy play. He's been hurt, but he's phenomenal. Bill Walton led his team to like 49 consecutive wins and 2 state championships in high school. Back then, freshmen were not eligible to play in college, so he played on the freshman team against Lou Alcindor in practice. He won the national championship his first 2 years, and then the final year, they lost to David Thompson, Monty Towle, Tom Burleson, and I know there was a big 6'10" baseball pitcher that played on that team as well. But there was only one game that came on. And I was infatuated with UCLA because my dad loved Bill Walton. One of my teachers that was very instrumental, John Wooden, came to speak, and he got me an autographed copy of John Wooden's Pyramid of Success. It's tucked inside my copy of They Call Me Coach by John Wooden. Walton's the number 1 draft. He goes to the Portland Trail Blazers. They're down 2-0 against the Philadelphia 76ers with Caldwell Jones, Darryl Dawkins, Bobby Jones, George McGinnis, Julius Erving, Dr. J, Mo Cheeks. I mean, an unbelievable lineup, and Walton leads them back to a 4-game sweep after being down. The next year, he was MVP. Then he had a foot injury in 1978. He couldn't play. He got traded. His teammates resented him because he was getting all this money, which wasn't as much back then, clearly, as they make today. But he essentially spent the next 8 years as a vagabond, being in depression because he couldn't play the game that he loved. But he got healthy. Red Auerbach took a chance on him, signed him with the Boston Celtics. He was sixth man of the year in 1986 on probably the greatest NBA team of all time. That Boston Celtics team was unbelievable with Bird, Parrish, McHale. You had Danny Ainge and Dennis Johnson, and then you had Bill Walton coming off the bench. If you want me to compare him to somebody that plays today, the same skill set as the Joker, Jokic from Denver. Not as big, not 280 pounds, but probably the greatest passing, most fundamentally sound big man to ever play the game. He helped the Celtics that year. Most of you know him from his career as a broadcaster. I got to briefly meet Bill Walton one time at the Final Four, and he was so gracious with his time. The big smile, larger than life. Didn't like to be listed 7 foot tall. They listed him 6'11", but he was really 7 foot. Huge hands. He shook my hand. He was so humble, appreciated the kind words I had. I told him about my dad. He asked me about him, about Coach Wooden. I told him I was a coach, and just like Steve Spurrier, they call me Coach. The Art of War by Sun Tzu and the King James Bible were the 3 books that were on my desk, and I told him I had a signed copy of John Wooden's Pyramid of Success tucked into that book, and he just gushed about John Wooden. You've seen the 30 for 30s. You've seen the special relationship they had. Bill Walton was so many things to so many people, but what you don't know is very involved in charities, always. There's a video of Mike Breen, who is the play-by-play guy for ESPN and ABC for the finals. Go and watch that story of Mike Breen describing what Bill Walton meant to him when he just called him for a hotel reference for his dad, who was dying, wanted to go back to San Diego to visit the ship he served his country on, the USS Midway, during the Korean War. I loved listening to Mike and Mike in the morning, and every week Bill Walton would bring so much joy to my life listening to him because of all the joy. And he could just go on and on and on. This guy partied with Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. He attended over 100 Grateful Dead concerts, maybe 200. A civil rights advocate, a peaceful demonstrator, a hippie, a guy that rode a bicycle everywhere he went, was on TV, calling games, was in studio with Stephen A. Smith and those guys, was in so much back pain that he couldn't sit on commercial breaks. He would have to lay down on the floor to stretch his back. I can certainly relate to that as somebody that's had 2 back surgeries, and knock on wood, God has given me good health from that. But a guy that always had a smile on his face and a kind word in his heart, even though he suffered so much over the course of his life due to the injuries, due to the depression. Thank God for his wife who pulled him up out of the depths of the depression. So many people that he had helped come to his rescue. But so much joy. But just like so many others, he fell victim to cancer and was taken from us way too soon at the age of just 71. That's only 11 years older than I am. And he will be missed. One of the greatest big men to play, but just like Shaq, one of the biggest personalities ever. The joy, the smile, the love for the game, and the love for people in his heart. Bill Walton. You will be missed. And I'm thankful for that one brief interaction. I'm thankful for having been able to watch not only him, but so many of the greatest players of all time play basketball in college and the NBA. And so with that, I'm going to sign off. Tonight is the Garnet and Black Town Hall. I'm getting ready to put that up for our VIP members. It's not too late to sign up and join us tonight. We'll be talking about the Summer of Shane, about baseball, certainly about Lamont Paris and men's basketball, and the huge addition of Miriam Daughter to Gamecock Baseball. But say a prayer for the Walton family and the basketball community, because we lost a giant in Bill Walton. I couldn't even talk about it yesterday, Monday. It brought me to tears. And I just loved him so much because of his zest for life. If you've ever seen the movie, The Dead Poets Society, Carpe Diem, seizing the day and basically sucking the marrow out of life. Nobody exemplified that more than Bill Walton. Again, he will be missed. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to John Whittle. Thanks to Craig and others in the Nana's Porch chat box. Thanks to my good friend Chris Payne for sponsoring the show and the chat box. I look forward to reconvening with all of you next Wednesday. And the final Wednesday Garnet and Black Town Hall of 2024 will take place tonight. Sign up for a trial membership. Join us for tonight's town hall. It should be epic. So for John Whittle, this is Keith Allsap. Craig, love you, brother. Thanks for hanging in, and thanks to everybody watching live, and thanks to all of you that will listen to this when I put it up wherever you get your podcast. This is Keith Allsap signing off and saying God bless, go Gamecocks, and we'll be back tomorrow with Peyton Titus on Gamecock Pod Daily to talk about the impact Miriam Daughter will have on this roster, as well as the other newcomers and returners. Allsap out.